Hello. Can you hear me? Can you hear me? I can't hear you.
Can you hear me now?
I can hear you now.
There you are. Looks okay. We have some folks coming in. Can you admit people, or do I need to do that?
Goodness, I don't know. Hey, hang on a second.
Good picture of you, Nancy.
Thanks. I don't know where to find the.
Oh, good. You're co-hosting, so you should be able to. Hello, folks. Thanks for joining us. We're going to give it a couple more minutes. We have expecting some more people to join us at the end of a long week, no doubt. So I'm going to check in with Nancy. Do you see that, Nancy? Can you admit?
I don't see a waiting room.
Okay, so it looks like.
Do you have the waiting room on, or are people just?
Like it for, yeah, no, there is one. It looks like I can admit people.
Oh, okay, I don't see a waiting room, so.
Okay. I will figure out how to do that. We'll just multitask here.
Okay.
All right. In the meantime, let me go ahead and get my screen up to share. Okay. Okay, let's see, make sure that looks okay for everybody. All right, can you guys see that okay? Nancy?
Yes, I can.
Okay, perfect. All right, now, as I am, okay, so now I see more participants. Let's admit folks in.
Yeah, I don't even have that option.
Okay. All right. Well, we live and learn in these times.
If you're trying to get it so that she can admit people, if you go to participants, and
Yes.
then when you go to participants, you can like scroll over her name and you can make her a host, and that should allow her to allow people in.
Perfect.
She already is a host though.
All right.
I already am a host, yeah.
I just made you the host. Let's see if you have it said you were a co-host, but perhaps now being the host instead of me, it lets you, yeah. Let me know, Nancy. Otherwise, we'll just wing it, folks. We've been doing that, a lot of that lately, I'm sure all of us. We'll just both keep an eye on it and let folks in as they're coming in. In the meantime,
I can't see the waiting room, Elizabeth. That's the problem.
Yeah? Okay.
I'm not finding. Yeah, I'm not finding it.
Okay. Well, I will just, if you guys just bear with me, we'll just continue to check in to make sure if we have new participants, I can let them in. And so this is kind of the first way we've done it this way. First time we've done it this way. So now we know. And next week we'll have that figured out. So with that, I just want to say happy Friday to everybody, and thank you guys for joining us. This is our third installment of our weekly Teach series that we are hosting from Down Syndrome Connection. Our goal is to let you know that you have support, and when it comes to distance learning, while you're trying to maintain your own Sorry, excuse me. There's someone, a very loud truck driving by. Sorry about that. While we are all sheltering in place and we're all trying to just get through these times, you're in your home, you're managing your household and your day-to-day life, and now a lot of families and parents and caregivers have been into an educator's role as well, and we understand that it can be super frustrating, confusing, and overwhelming. And so our goal through our Teach series is to try to hone in on those concerns and challenges that we're hearing from a lot of our families, and to try to provide you with the support you need to feel a little more empowered. We want to provide you with access to materials that we know work for our learners. And we just want to be able to provide you with the type of training and support you need to get through this time. So that's our goal here. As always, we're here for you whenever you need us. We have not stopped doing business. Even though we're all working remotely, we're all still available via phone call. We can do online or phone consults. We're available via email. And we just want to let you know that you're not alone. We're here to help and here for you. For those of you who have not joined us for any of our prior Teach seminars or have not met me or worked with me directly, my name is Elizabeth. I am the Director of Education at Down Syndrome Connection, and I'm here year-round to support you guys with any education-related needs. So whether you're navigating IEP for the first time as a new family getting into the school system, or you've been going through a lot of the same things and you just need a little extra support, or team communication with the team, on-site consult with your education team, ability awareness training at your school. We're here to support you, and I'm your gal. So feel free to reach out to me at any time. You can see here on our homepage my email address, elizabeth@dscba.org, and you can reach me there anytime if you have any questions. So today we have a topic we're going to go over, which is talking about modifications for students with Down syndrome. Now, if your child is in a public school setting and has an IEP, and may not have to be a public school setting, but we know that's where our IEPs are generated for the most part, then you're working closely with an education team, and our hope is that you have developed homeschool communication that's healthy, where roles have been identified, you know who's doing what, and hopefully working with a team that has identified a person who's already making modifications to your child's work. Now, we have some students who are in special day class programs, and we have some students who are in general ed, fully included, some kiddos that spend half the day, you know, in a general ed placement, half the day outside. Obviously, there are different supports coming in and out, and our kiddos are receiving lots of different services. Through distance learning, we know that our kiddos might not have the same bandwidth as far as online learning, working with a teacher virtually. And I'm not sure that everyone is receiving modified work. If you are working closely with a special education teacher, you may have, let's see here. Oh, sorry, okay. You may have someone who is already giving you modified work. But I hear from a lot of families who are saying, no, we're kind of just being given whatever the rest of the class is being given, and I'm not quite sure how to make this homework work for my kiddo and my particular child's IEP goals. So we're going to get into that. Now, as we go through this, it's a lot of content. We don't have a lot of time. This is an hour-long session, and so we know that you'll probably have some questions for us. Nancy LaBelle, our executive director, she's joining me and joins me every Friday to help facilitate those questions. We don't have time to address all of your questions. But if there's something that Nancy feels is keeping us from moving forward, or she's seeing a lot of the same question, she may stop me and ask me to address that particular question so that we can all kind of move forward on the same page. That being said, we will be sending out a short, very brief survey to you guys following our presentation. And if you have any specific questions, comments, feedback, we really welcome it. And then again, I'm available via email. So if there's something that you feel is pertaining to your particular experience with your kiddo that we didn't quite address in this presentation, then please feel free to gather those questions and send them over to me. And I'd be happy to give you more of some individualized strategies, feedback, information, etc. Happy to do that. So we appreciate your patience with that. And again, we would appreciate and do value any feedback you have following our presentation so that we can continue to provide you with the best services and support that we can. So I think that, let's see here. All right, so I think it's important for us to all understand and get on the same page. One thing I've been saying at these teach seminars is that this is a really, really good time for parents to become kind of experts, if you will. Now, a lot of our parents are already doing that work because you find once you have a child with special needs and you get into the education system, it's really up to you to fight for and advocate for your child's best interests, your child's education plan and journey. You guys do know you are a key part of the IEP team and that you have the ability to help shape your child's educational journey by working with the team and by being knowledgeable about the things that you can do to work with your kiddo and to really work toward those IEP goals and help your child make appropriate progress in the best placement setting possible. Knowing this stuff is going to be invaluable. Really understanding what your child is entitled to in a classroom setting. And with every child with an IEP, there are certain accommodations and modifications that can be applied to curriculum, to this classroom setting, etc. And so I think having a clear understanding about those things will help you establish a better foundation and then be able to advocate and let your education team know what works for your child, what your child's going to need in order to succeed and make that appropriate progress. So I just want to touch on some of these basics. So with accommodations change the how of the learning, right? So when you have accommodations, you're still learning the same content. So you're learning the exact same things all the peers are learning in the classroom, but they can be presented in a different way through different methods. For example, if you have 30 math problems, if that child is still capable of solving all 30 of those problems, but may only need like 3 on a page, 10 pages full, that's an accommodation. They're still learning the same content, but we're just changing the how, the delivery, in order to accommodate that child's needs. So I think that that's an important thing to know. So if we want a child to access the same content on a chalkboard, but that child cannot see in the back of the classroom, then we can move that child to the front of the classroom to have preferential seating so that that child can access the same content on the blackboard. So I hope that makes sense to everyone. That's what an accommodation looks like. And most kiddos that only receive accommodations go with having a 504. It's important to know that anyone receiving accommodations and not modifications, that student is held to grade level standards. So that is a student who is on regular diploma track, and we're just accommodating some needs in order for them to access all of that same curriculum and material. Modifications are very different, and modifications generally apply to all of our kiddos with Down syndrome. We have an IEP, we have individualized goals for that student, and more often than not, those goals are not always they're not always at that grade level standard, right? And that's okay. So making a modification, we're actually changing the what right? So that could be completely different content. It can be a different method of delivery. It doesn't have to be a standardized test or assessment. The product, what that child produces or how they produce it, can be completely different than what the rest of the class is doing. And hold on just a second, I'm gonna let some, oh, it's a chat. Nancy, are you able to see the chats and look at those? I just want to make sure.
Yeah, I'm good all around. I can actually invite people in and I can see the chat. So I'll take care.
Okay, cool. All right, cool. And I just lost my last slide. I'm not sure how to go back to that. Let's see. Oh, hold on just a second, guys. How do I go back? Hold on just a sec. I'm not quite sure how to do this. So bear with me, folks.
So Elizabeth, maybe you can answer this question while we're,
Sure.
if your child gets modifications, is your child not able to get a diploma?
So that's a very good question. So up until, so you're not going to start having the conversation about being on the diploma track. Am I, hold on just a second.
Okay, so it looks like we lost Elizabeth. And so if you'll all bear with us, I'm sure she'll pop right back on. I see her computer now booting back. Elizabeth, are you with us back now? We can't hear you if you're speaking.
Can you guys hear me?
We can now, yes.
I'm so sorry. We're having some technical difficulties here. It seems to happen. Okay. Okay.
So you were answering the chat question.
All right. Sorry, folks. Sorry about that. Yes. So that is definitely, as your kiddo gets older, you're getting into middle school and you're starting to talk about transitional plans when they're going into high school. It's something to consider whether you want your child to be on a regular diploma track. And if so, obviously your kiddo is going to have to pass those standardized tests. They are going to have to be working at grade level standards. And at that point, you'll obviously want to take advantage of all of the services, the individualized support that you can in order to attain or work to attain that typical diploma and be on that diploma track. Our kiddos with IEPs have until the age of 22 to be able to work toward, be on that diploma track and work toward their high school diploma. I will say that as our kiddos, and especially, you know, a lot of our kiddos who are in gen ed placement, or our families who really want them to participate in a general ed placement experience, to have the social connections, to be included in that type of school setting. We're going to start seeing more and more gaps between the abilities of the student with Down syndrome in that setting, and then some of the demands of the grade, you know, that they're in. So a lot of our families choose to do not choose to stay on the diploma track, and instead try to focus on those individualized goals, and then so that their kiddo can receive that alternate diploma, but graduate, be in the same classes with their peers that they've been in classes with throughout their educational journey, and then they take advantage of local resources that they'll have through like the regional center up until they're 22. So there's some really wonderful transitional programs, et cetera. And so I think that that's an important question, and it's a big question for sure, as far as when you're taking a look, you're getting into middle school and you're seeing the gap and, you know, where your child's strengths are, where your learners' areas of need are, what the current standardized curriculum is, and whether you feel your child is going to be in a position to achieve that. Now, up until then, so if you have an early learner, let's say you're in grade school, you're just starting out, and you're making your way through elementary school into middle school, you still have the ability to work below grade level standards and be in a classroom, depending on your placement, that's comfortable for your education team, what works for your child, et cetera. But let's use, for example, a child who's in first grade in a general ed placement setting. That child can absolutely participate in a modified curriculum, and it will not impact their ability to be on a regular diploma track if you decide later when it's time that is the journey you want to go on. Now, at that point, you will have to complete all of the work that is provided to all of the students. You will have to be at grade level standards and completing all of that work. I hope that helps. And if you have further questions about that, or want to know a little bit more about that process, please feel free to email me about that as well, because it's a big question, and it's something that I think it's important for families to, you know, you don't want to get too tied up about it early on. You really want to focus on goals that are going to help your child make progress, that are going to, you know, benefit, you know, provide that foundation. There are certain things that we really want our kiddos to gain knowledge about, and an understanding, and a firm understanding, so that at the end of the day, after their educational journey, they're able to participate meaningfully in the real world as independently as possible. And so that's what we really want to focus on, establishing that foundation, building their confidence, and instilling that self-efficacy. And then from there, you can assess their skill level, you know their present levels. You work with that education team, and the education team should always have in mind, until you have that conversation, should always be working toward, you know, keeping your kiddo on that typical diploma track. So I hope that makes sense. The next piece that we want to talk about, so we were talking about accommodations, modifications. Hopefully I cleared that up. The technical difficulties kind of took us for a loop there. So hopefully we're back, and I will just touch on this, and then we'll go into some more practical strategies. So just again, to reiterate, with accommodation, we're changing the how. So, and the modification, we're changing the what. So for example, here you see on our slide, a reading accommodation. If you're accommodating, you could provide a book in an alternate format, such as Braille, large print, audio formats, digital text. Again, it's the same content. For a modification, you're literally providing like an alternate content. So if you have a 5th grader with Down syndrome who's in 5th grade, but is reading at a 1st grade level, which is totally fine, that's not a problem. We want to make sure that the content, that the book that kiddo is reading is at the appropriate reading level. And so not reading the exact same book as his other peers, but still accessing the key content just through easier text, more simplified text that is more appropriate for that child's learning level and reading level. So those are just some examples there. We will have the slides up on our website so that you guys can take a closer look. It'll be in PDF form. You can really take a look at some more of the content here, because I know it's a lot to cover, but that just gives some examples as far as accommodations versus modifications. And I think that it's important to have a clear understanding about what that means. All right.
We're also recording this as well.
Yes. So just to get into that, we're not going to go too much into universal design for learning. Those of you who have joined me for a Teach workshop before, you guys know how passionate I am about differentiated means of instruction and representation, expression, and engagement. But universal design does give us an opportunity to really shake things up and really get creative with how we present content to learners of different abilities and different learning styles, how we engage them through, for example, multi-sensory opportunities attaching to real life items, movement, music, etc. And then how we can assess their knowledge, their understanding. Again, it doesn't always have to be a standardized test. And when you have modifications, and when you have an IEP and you are able to take advantage of having modified curriculum, that means you can actually modify the way you take a test, what the test looks like, the format of the testing, and we'll get into a little bit more of that. But that all comes under the umbrella of universal design for learning. And more and more schools are adopting this practice and learning more about it, and teachers are being more and more encouraged to identify each learner's unique ability and really try to think about how they can engage and their learners in different ways according to their individual strengths. So we'll talk a little bit more about that. And the reason we're doing this is because we want everyone to have an equitable experience when learning. And so we see here that we used to show a slide that talked about equity versus equality. And you can see here to the left, the slide, it's talking about equal, right? Every kiddo has the exact same box, which doesn't mean the kiddo to the far right can see over the fence to watch the ball game. So now we've made it equitable, right? The big kid never needed a box in the first place, so he can share his with the other kid. So they can all see, right? But that being said, they're still all using the same boxes, right? But if we think about it, more flexible learning experiences and giving access to learners in lots of different ways through that universal design, then every kiddo has the ability to see the whole picture, right? We don't have that barrier, that fence that's accessing learning. We can all have a great view and all have that kind of equal access to learning itself. So when we're talking about differentiating instruction and when you're thinking about making modifications, it's really important to understand your learner. And as you move into the fall school year, it's going to be really important for you to be able to advocate how your kiddo learns best. And since we're all at home and we're all engaged in distance learning, and now you find yourself wearing the hat of a teacher, this is a great way to get creative and really get to know your child and understand how does this kiddo learn? And when you know the facts about your learner, and I had everyone, I sent out the Word document that has the worksheet for a student profile, and we're going to talk a little bit more about that, but I would hope to do that so that you could really kind of reflect on your child, and really reflect on your child's goals, and think about, okay, now when we have this information and it's sitting clearly on a piece of paper in front of us, then we have the foundation for ways to make the most appropriate modifications we can to their schoolwork. So you want to learn about that. Now, this is in a classroom setting as far as understanding the teaching style and the lesson. The reason I kept this slide in here is because I want you to be mindful of that as you're moving into the fall school year, to understand. You could even have a conversation with the teacher, you know, about their teaching style. Understand where those barriers might come up for your child, and then hopefully we'll already have some solutions that we can offer up to that teacher. For those of you who participate in a general ed classroom setting, I can't tell you how many general ed teachers have come up to me with tears in their eyes because this is a novel experience for them. They've been used to teaching their students kind of the same way for so many years, and all of a sudden they have a child with different needs, different abilities, and they're not quite sure exactly what to do. And a lot of times it's not a well-oiled machine, and there aren't these perfect processes in place. And a lot of times I might be in an IEP meeting or sitting down with an education team, and the resource specialist thought that the gen ed teacher was working with, you know, the aide to make modifications. The aide saying, I'm not being paid to make modifications. That's not my role. The general ed teacher saying, I don't know how to make a modification because I've never done this before. I'm not a special ed teacher. And the special ed teacher is saying, I can help with that, but we don't have any type of collaborative plan. And I just thought they were doing it. And so it's important to understand that your child is entitled to modifications, and also know that if the demand is inappropriate, if your child is not receiving appropriate modifications, we're going to start to see behaviors. Communication and demand are the two biggest issues that I see in a classroom setting when it comes to behaviors. So when we start having teachers saying, this child's driving me crazy every time we go to sit down for circle or for a small group time or learning center, she clears the table. Well, I think it's also a time then to reflect on what's being presented to her. How is the content being presented? Is the content appropriate? If it becomes overwhelming and the demand is too much and it's not aligned with IEP goals, we are going to see those frustrations come out in different behaviors. So this all, it all kind of comes together with this whole child learning, is understanding that your kiddo doesn't have to be doing the same work that the other kids are doing. And hopefully we're going to give you some examples that you can share, not because we expect you to know how to modify curriculum. We understand that most of you are not teachers and you're trying to juggle everything else in life. But if anything, you can understand what your teaching team should be doing to a certain extent as you're working on distance learning. And hopefully this will give you some ideas and ways that you can start to communicate and advocate for the modifications that need to be made for your kiddo. So when it all comes down to it, the best place to start is knowing your student. So you know your kiddo better than anyone else does, and it's up to you to make sure that you get that information to your education team. You want to make sure that they know what makes your kiddo tick. What's his personality type? Does he have a lot of sensory needs? What are his biggest strengths? We want to think from a can-do attitude, a can-do standpoint. What are your kiddo's biggest strengths, but what are some of the things that are big challenges? It's important to know that so that we can kind of reshape and try to work through those in a mindful way. And then a lot of parents I talk with and a lot of education teams say, yeah, we've got the IEP, it's here, you know, it's 80 pages long, let me take a look. And I find a lot of times that not everyone's really that familiar with the specific IEP goals. And I keep hammering this in every week because it's so important. We're relying on these IEP goals to not only be appropriate, but we also want to see that our kiddos are making appropriate progress. And if we don't have a clear understanding about your kiddos' your IEP goals and a clear understanding that, hey, these goals make sense, they're appropriate. And if the education team doesn't have a clear idea about your child's IEP goals, there's going to be a problem. You're not going to be able to develop appropriate modifications. And so always having those goals in mind, and I always tell parents, think of it as like, 5 bullet points where you're just choosing those key words. Like, this is what we're working on. I know we're working on CVC words, or I know that my kiddos learning to count to 20. I know that that's a goal. And so when you have those kind of right in front of you and you have a clear understanding of them, you start to realize ways you can incorporate those goals into modified lessons. So really learn those goals and make sure your education team has a firm understanding about them as well. So like I said, know the goals for your learner. You want to relate the content to prior knowledge and interests. Our kiddos are super motivated by things they love. Our kiddos are not super motivated by things that are not interesting to them. And there are lots of ways that we can keep our kiddos interested by utilizing their interests and their motivators. If the, Bob books aren't working for your kiddo because they're boring, then, choose the Toy Story book because it's of higher interest for your child. It's going to be a bigger motivator. And then you can modify it by highlighting key words that you're working on, by circling the sight words that are on your IEP goals list, etc. So we want to always think about what this kiddo likes, what's motivating, what's interesting. Equity and equality. Everyone, we want to make sure that everyone has access to learning itself. I've had some families and some education teams tell me that their students, especially as they get older, they don't like to work on different content in the classroom that their peers aren't working on. And we've got some solutions for that as well. But one goal with modifying is to try to get creative and see how we can make it look as much, similar as we can to what peers are doing around in the classroom, but also simplify it to a point where it makes sense for that learner. And then we're going to learn a little bit more about some of the common curriculum adaptations. These are some things that hopefully your education teams are already doing. And if they're not, then you can learn about these common adaptations and you can start making some suggestions according to how your kiddo learns. We always want to maintain high standards. Our kiddos may be learning at a different grade level than their same age peers, but we need to make sure we're always providing high quality content. We never want to assume that our kiddos cannot do something. They can think. Our children with Down syndrome, students with Down syndrome can absolutely be challenged to think at a deeper and more meaningful level and develop higher thinking skills. They just need the appropriate supports, the appropriate demand. We want it to be a productive struggle. That's what we call it, right? The kind of thing that makes you feel good, that builds self-confidence, builds self-efficacy. If it's too simple, we're going to get bored. We're not going to feel that feeling of accomplishing something. And if the demand is too high, you're going to start getting those frustrations, those anxieties tied to feeling overwhelmed by the demand. So we want it to be a productive struggle. Technology is everywhere these days. We're utilizing it more than ever as we're sheltered in place. And that doesn't mean just a whole bunch of screen time. It means this technology is a multisensory way of engaging our kiddos. And if you have a child that's motivated, who is motivated by an iPad or apps on the iPad, or wants to, do the kind of the same things you're doing or get on the computer, utilize that. We have more opportunities out there than ever. And there are some really great devices that can really help your child access all of the key content we're working on. So once we know what motivates, then we want to access. We've got picture boards, we've got choice cards, there are speech generating devices, there are books on tape, we can utilize calculators, iPads, all of these different applications that we all have access to. And so as we're integrating technology throughout the day, it gives our kiddos access to something that's motivational, but again, it's just another multisensory means of instruction and learning and engagement. We always want to make sure our kiddo has an opportunity to communicate. This is no better time than now to really gain an understanding about your child's best methods of communication. So we want to always incorporate all forms of communication, whether it's gestural, verbal, if they're using verbal approximations, we're using visual choice boards. We want to provide them with any outlet that we can, because obviously a student cannot participate meaningfully if that student cannot communicate meaningfully. So if that's something, as we go into the fall, it's such a huge piece for a child to be able to participate meaningfully in the classroom. And so I would recommend, as we are all at home and we're working with our kiddos, to really explore all of the different methods of communication that work for your kiddo, and develop, create a list so that you can advocate for your child when you're talking with your teachers of, hey, this is how my kiddo can represent, can express his or her understanding. These are some things that work for us. For example, instead of giving a book report and being able to say the whole report over and over again, we can work on some pre-recorded picture books. My kiddo can dance and act out while there's someone else reading it aloud. There are lots of different ways, and I think that it's important for you to just start kind of observing, gather some information, figure out how your kiddo best communicates so that you can communicate that to your child's team in the fall. So when we're making modifications, I think it's really, really important that we're talking about, this is a strengths-based approach. I have, it's a little heartbreaking when I talk with families and I talk with education teams, and I hear a lot of, how am I supposed to do that? He can't even talk, more or less, read, or give a book report. He can't do this, he can't do that, he can't do this, he can't write his own name. How is he supposed to be in 4th grade right now? And I really want us to all change our, and I know as parents, you're always advocating for what your child can do. And I think while we're starting to think about making modifications, and as you move toward helping your team understand how to best, modify for your child, it's important to understand your child's strengths, which is, again, another piece of that student profile that I sent out. So just taking a look at this strengths-based approach, right? If you look at the can'ts, like, oh, he can't write. Well, can he type? Can he use letter tiles and put them together? Can he use a clicker app? That's just, that's an application, really cool to be able to build words and sentences. So utilizing technology, can he do that? Can he copy what he just saw, if he can't write it just by thinking it out and writing it? Can he dictate his ideas if he can't write them down? Can we highlight or circle things in order to show his understanding and expression? There are some folks who may not grasp writing, but that doesn't mean they don't have something to say and can't show you their understanding. That's a fine motor skill. It should never be tied to an educational goal. It's an OT, fine motor skill. So if they can't speak, well, having have challenges with your expressive communication due to hypotonia should never impede your ability to be able to make appropriate progress in a classroom setting. It's our responsibility to help that child find a way to communicate. So if that child cannot speak, that's okay. What can that child do? That child can point. That child could use gestures. Perhaps that child can use some sign language, can use visual representations, can use an AAC device, a low-tech or high-tech device. We want to find out what that child can do. That child can't add or subtract or multiply. Well, maybe, and not in an abstract way yet, right? Maybe right now it's still difficult, but what can we do? Well, then let's use a calculator to reinforce these ideas. Let's use manipulatives. Let's use real life items that are appealing to that child. Let's see what that child can do with those things, and we can build skills from there. My child can't read. Well, can your child listen to a peer or a sibling read? Can your child listen to an audio book? Can your child understand visuals? You have to begin somewhere. And so once you establish that child's strengths, again, we can work from there and start building up. So the other thing is, I hear a lot of teachers that say, we're getting into 3rd grade now, and this content is going to be really tough. I've got a lot of lectures. We're starting to learn about science. There's going to be a ton of vocabulary. There's no way this child can keep up. He can't keep up. He just can't learn all of that. It's too much. Well, what can he learn? Can we learn a big idea, right? Can we learn a big idea about photosynthesis? What does that look like? Can we break that down into just 3 key vocabulary terms? Our kiddos can and will learn things. It's just about making sure that we understand what they can do, and then building upon those strengths in the way we present material and engage them. And so I'm not going to go into tons of detail with this, especially since we had our technical difficulties, but, and this is more about what I think is important for you to advocate to your education team once you get into the fall and you're really trying to look at how to support your child in the school setting. But these are just some ideas about, where you start. So you always want to start with assuming that your child can do everything that everyone else is doing, right? And then when you ask that question and it's like, well, not quite this, like I can't do it. He's still having difficulty achieving this, even with extra prompts or cues, or even with like highlighted text. Then you go from there, right? Well, then can a peer or a sibling help? Okay, if not, can you work with a group, a cooperative learning group, and maybe we can achieve access the same curriculum and do the same content. If not, then okay, can that child, if they can't do it independently, then maybe with some adult assistance and sharing the content together and working together to complete it, we can get that same level content done. Okay, if that's not working, then we can start making adjustments. We can do an alternate activity that's still linked to certain goals of the lesson, etc. And so we want to take, that's part of that strengths-based approach, is starting there at the top, and then just modifying and adapting from there. We don't want to presume that our kiddos just can't and that they start at the bottom, and so then we're not going to give them that productive struggle. So here are some practical strategies. And these are just some things that I think are important to be mindful of. Again, some of you are receiving modified work, some of you are not. And these may give you some ideas about how to, some ways that you can modify your own kiddos' homework, or some ideas you can present to their education team so that they can be doing the modifications for you and kind of get into the practice of that. So for reading adaptations for our kiddos, larger print is always a really big one. Making sure that we don't have tiny text, and thousands of words, hanging out on, just a couple of pages. We want to make sure that we're giving them access. So an accommodation would be creating, a larger print of the same material, audio books of the same material. You can read shared reading with a parent, caregiver, or a sibling. You can use a device like an AAC device to participate in that reading out loud. Some of our kiddos, reading is one of our biggest strengths. And so some of our kiddos are reading books on the same grade level as their peers, but they may need some adaptations in order to access that same content. for our kiddos who are not reading at the same grade level, or who have to answer comprehension questions, etc., which is definitely a big challenge for a lot of our kiddos. Some modifications can be really clear. And so, for example, a comprehension worksheet, you highlight the answers in the text. So you just identify a key piece of text. You can highlight the answer and color code it to the question. That's just one example. So our kiddos see that pink question, they can find the pink color highlight in the text, and then they can take the answer from that to show you their comprehension. That's just one example of that. Asking concrete questions to provide so you provide a prompt. So let's say we're reading a story about a mom and son going to the doctor. It's his first experience going to a doctor, and he's nervous. He's going to get a shot. And so by prompting, by giving two very contrasting choices. So when we're talking about comprehension, you can say things like, all right, so did John go to the ice cream shop, or did he go to the doctor? And having your kiddo choose from those two contrasting choices. That's another way to modify for our kiddos who are having a little more difficulty with comprehension. Again, you've got to start somewhere. And once we start seeing that our kiddos can master those types of questions, then we can layer onto that. We can give them more demands. But we definitely want to foster success. We want these kiddos to understand that they're getting this right? They're finding these answers. We're giving them a little help. But then when they're doing it, we're building that self-confidence to take on more challenges. Adapted books. So this particular website, you can get adapted books online, and then readworks.org has all kinds of lower reading level passages and comprehension questions. It's really cool. They also have and when you get into like kindergarten or first grade reading levels, they have visual icons that help with comprehension questions. It's really a really nice layout, and you can get a lot of like social studies based stories and passages, things that really connect to a lot of core curriculum and content. And so that's always a good one to check out if you haven't already. It's a really cool site, and it's something that you can bring up to your education teams because they've already done the modifications for you. You just identify what's the reading level, what's my kiddo's reading level, and now you can choose, okay, well, yeah, we're in third grade, but this is more appropriate to where my kiddo is right now with reading. And then all of a sudden you've got social studies about, Thanksgiving, but it's already been modified and to your child's reading level. Those visual icons are there, and appropriate comprehension questions are already there. No one needs to reinvent the wheel, so we're always happy to provide you with resources and links of places that have done the work for us. Writing adaptations. Writing is a big one for our kiddos. Again, it's a fine motor skill, and we just want to make sure that we are giving them as much opportunity, as much choice. We want to make sure that we're not giving them tons of demand at a time, because it can really take out and cause frustrations. It's a difficult skill to master when you have hypotonia. So try using like markers instead of a pencil or crayon. Always give choices, right? But markers have a little more feedback, that thicker tip. It kind of, our kiddos can feel it going into the paper a little bit more, and that might provide them with a bit more feedback as they're working on handwriting. Slant boards are always great to help support those fine motor challenges, give them a little wrist support, arm support. We can trace over a highlighter. So if you've got spelling words, or you're working on a particular, a goal might be to write a sentence, maybe one of your IEP goals, a 3 to 5 word sentence. You can start those in highlighter, and we can work from there, and you just kind of add on demands from there. We can dictate to a scribe. So if it's an expressive writing activity, for example, we don't have to make our kiddos actually write down all of their ideas. That's a fine motor challenge. So they may be able to dictate their ideas, and a parent or a sibling or a peer or teacher can actually write those ideas down. So we want to make sure we also identify what the goal is. Is it is it a writing challenge, or is it an expression, an expressive writing challenge where we're asking our kids to formulate ideas and then express them. So we want to make sure that we're not adding on demands. So you can always dictate to a scribe. We can provide a word bank for our kiddos to choose, using things like clicker sentences, or Clicker Connect app. If you guys haven't heard of Clicker, it's super cool. There are it's multi-layered as far as the demands are concerned, and where your kiddo is present level, and you can add on new demands. They can build words, sentences, they can attach pictures. It's a really cool app, and so if you haven't checked out Clicker, then do that. It's been a really good tool for a lot of our kiddos that utilize technology in the classroom. And again, keeping that primary goal in mind, right? If it's handwriting, then we're only going to work on handwriting. If it's spelling, our kiddo doesn't necessarily have to write that out, right? If it's spelling, that's the goal, spelling. And so I'll show you some spelling adaptations that'll help clear that up. Or again, if it's composing, if we're asking them to generate ideas, we don't want that to also be a fine motor demand for writing. And so we want to just think about this, so this is an example, demands of journal writing. Okay. So for some of our older learners where their peers are expected to keep a journal or do journal writing, well, it's tough for our learners to even just come up with an idea necessarily. Sometimes that can be pretty abstract. So we may want to provide picture prompts in order to help them generate an idea to start from. Turning that idea into complete sentences, right? That's a whole other demand. And so we may need some help. We can modifying that by giving them a sentence starter. We can help them out with that because again, we're asking them to just deliver some ideas. Spelling words can be really difficult and lead to frustration. So if our goal is for them to generate ideas, then we can help with the spelling of words by using something like Clicker Sentences. We can pre-cut sentence strips based on their ideas. We can cut it up and have them put them together. Or they can dictate their ideas and someone can write them down for them. That's another modification. Again, it's not a writing goal. It is an expression, a goal of expressing your ideas. So we want to make sure that we're giving them that outlet and not adding that extra demand. And it's very difficult sometimes for our kiddos to write each letter, and it can take a long time. So using things like the Clicker app, copying, tracing over a highlighter, or dictating or other modifications we can use.
Hey, Elizabeth, this is Nancy.
Yes, Nancy.
I just want to say that Larkin had a question about handwriting without tears, asking if that was recommended. And what I came back and said was, yes, it's a recommended tool to try. And again, that's about tracing over and over again and getting used to the shapes of letters. Yeah. And I also told her that the app was very good. Do we have that in our lending library to try out? I can't remember if we have
Handwriting without tears?
Yeah.
Yes, we do.
Okay. Okay.
We do have handwriting without tears. One thing we don't have in our library, but it's something that I've worked with a lot, and I've worked with educational therapists who have worked specifically with kiddos with Down syndrome with it, is called Wilson Fundations, Fundations, and kind of similar to handwriting without tears in certain ways, but it's a more comprehensive, like literacy approach. I think our kiddos really like it because of the visual cues for handwriting, but that's just another one to check out. But handwriting without tears is a good one as well. Both of them really focused on that repetition of letter shape. Yeah, we do have handwriting without tears, and we'd be more than happy to loan that out to you if it's something you'd like to try out. So for spelling, so that's, kind of getting into that. Again, a spelling test doesn't have to mean that your kiddo is writing the word out. So we can have pre-written, like you see here. These are all words that end in app. And then we're just looking for those beginning sounds. So it looks like, we have pre-cut letters here, and based on let's say, verbal cues from a teacher or a caregiver. We've got our 6 words here, and we're just working on those beginning sounds. And so here in this example, the kiddo can choose from the letter bank, and then depending on what the verbal cue you're giving, you know, spell slap, slap. Then they can choose from that bank and they can find that beginning letter sound. So now we're not asking them to write S-L-A-P. We're just asking them to identify the answer and, you know, put it where it needs to go. So that's a modification. Some of our kiddos may just be, the goals may just be working on beginning sounds, beginning consonant sounds, or sight words or CVC words, maybe middle vowel sounds. And so you can modify these spelling words to focus on your kiddo's specific IEP goal. And here's just some different adaptations. So you can fill in the missing letter. You can use letter tiles or magnetic letters, so we're not having to write them out. You can circle the word that's spelled correctly, maybe give 2 or 3 choices. Definitely shorten that spelling list. So if your kiddo is not spelling all 10 words, start with 3, start with 5. You can work up from there. And again, based on your IEP goals, you may just be using an alternative spelling list altogether. But a lot of times if I have like students who are in a classroom and they've got like 10 new spelling words, because they like to work on the same things that their peers are working on, we may just be identifying a letter. I might still be working on letter recognition with a student who's in 2nd grade with other kiddos who are already working on spelling words, but that kiddo can highlight or circle all of the, you know, the cues or all of the E's, etc. I hope that makes sense. Science and social studies. It's okay that our kiddos may not be learning every single piece, every single concept that's spelled out for them and through lectures and tests, etc. But having those main ideas, that key vocabulary, I think is a great formula. You know, you can see here in an example, this is a modified activity for ancient Egypt. And so there was a whole unit on ancient Egypt, and all of these kids, you know, the rest of the class, they're writing essays about ancient Egypt and describing, you know, lots of different details that they read in text. And here, we just want to make sure that our student here is focused on those key terms. We want to make sure that that the core content that we're studying, that we can at least grab a few of those key vocabularies and vocabulary words and attach them with a picture to show that, yes, I understand what this means. And, you know, it may come with like a few short sentences about history about Egypt, etc. So this is just an example of a modification. Again, we want to make sure that it just reflects their goals. So with any of this, so if one of the goals is just building vocabulary associated with the core content, this is a great way to modify that lesson in order to achieve that goal. Science and social studies here. So graphic organizers, which you can find online, you just Google, this one is for edhelper.com, and you can print those out, and it just really organizes those key details in order to help our kiddos kind of process and understand what that means. So here we're taking energy. This is all about energy, which was a lot more detailed for the rest of the class, but we want to just focus on those key goals. So here we know the topic is energy. There are 3 different kinds of energy that we're focused on. One is calories, and it's in food. The other is electrical. Those are things that are plugged in. And the other is sound energy. It's made by vibrations. And so with these visuals and with the simplified text and organizational layout, our kiddos can really start to grasp those key concepts, and they can give you some information about energy. Again, it may not be a full essay, but we want our kiddos to understand that key content and be able to express their understanding about that. Also, yeah, libraries are closed right now, but YouTube, our kiddos love videos. You know, if you're learning about something and your kiddo seems disinterested, look it up on YouTube, see if there's a video about it. That's part of that differentiated instruction and engagement. Here's just another example. This is science and social studies. We use blank labels. This is an example of side-by-side modeling where the student and his aide. So if you have a worksheet you need to work on with your kiddo, make one for yourself as well. Our kids love to see that we're interested in doing the same kind of things that they're doing. So just make a copy of it and pretend like you've got homework as well. You can model answers. In this particular worksheet, there were a couple of things they worked on. One was seeing the skeleton and the different body parts, and the student's aide pointed to a body part on the picture, and they had a puzzle as well. And then the student pointed to that body part on his body. So we are reinforcing those concepts. He's showing that he has an understanding. Is he going to always carry the vocabulary like cranium or metatarsals? Maybe, maybe not. It depends on if it's interesting for him. But we can show that there's a basic understanding there. And then in addition, one of the IEP goals was to have, is to work on initial consonant sounds. And so as you can see, we have boxes that are ready to be filled in with those initial consonant sounds. So he may not be learning all of the complex names for all of the body parts, but he can point to them on his body when he's modeled and shown on a picture or in a puzzle. And then with all of these kind of hard words that they're working on, he can at least identify that beginning sound. So cranium, what does cranium start with? And then we get an answer, elicit an answer from our kiddo, and then you can even model what that letter looks like, and that your kiddo can then write it in. It's all about, you know, attaching it to the goal. So here he's working on initial consonant sounds, still doing the same work that his peers are doing, and he's showing an understanding by seeing it in the picture and pointing to it on his body. For math modifications, math is super abstract. We want to make sure our kiddos have as much real life interaction with math and multisensory opportunities as possible. Visuals are super important. We want to reinforce concepts using manipulatives, toys, motivators in the house, whatever you can work with that you can count. I've said it before, you know, if it's snack time, you got your goldfish, then, you know, utilize those while you're working on a math worksheet. Reduce that demand. Numicon, we had a workshop about Numicon a couple of weeks ago, and Numicon's a great mathematics approach, but again, just another type of manipulative. Number lines, hundreds, charts to help them see and understand are always important. Calculators are fine. Our kiddos can use calculators. As a matter of fact, it's a great way to check work, and we all use calculators. I don't know any adult that is doing any kind of, you know, any type of complex math at all at the end of the day when we're not bringing out our iPhones and checking our figures on a calculator. Our kids can learn how to do that, and that's okay. It doesn't all have to be right there in their, you know, at the tip of their tongue and the top of their head. These are ways that we can help reinforce concepts and build skills from there. So we want to provide them with all the tools that they can use, and that's part of modifications. Our kiddos can use a calculator. Talking Kids calculator app is a really good one. So some of the demands with math, right? You've got to read the problem. That can be hard sometimes. So you can always have a parent or a sibling read it out, obviously in school, a peer or the teacher. Determining which numbers to use, you can help modify by highlighting or circling the numbers. Writing an equation can be difficult. We already talked about handwriting, so we can dictate that. We can already have it written out for them. I always use the choice of, do you want to write it or do you want to stick it? By empowering our kiddo with that choice. Sometimes they choose to write it, but at least just giving a choice. So if the writing seems difficult, we can still problem solve without that added demand. And solving the equation is tough. Let's use manipulatives. That's to help solve the equation. If we need to use a calculator to solve it or to check it or to build that knowledge, you can do that as well. And again, we don't have to write out that answer. There are lots of different things you can do. Sticky labels, number tiles, use an app, calculator, etc. So finally, at the end, we've got different approaches here. And again, we'll have this up on our website, but these are specific approaches that we know support our students with Down syndrome, and there's nothing wrong with bringing up any of these approaches, especially if these are some things you're working on while sheltered in place. If you're finding that these approaches are giving you a positive outcome, that your kiddos are learning, they're engaged, they're motivated, and you're seeing progress, then you have every right to advocate. These aren't curriculums, these are approaches. And when we talk about visiting back that universal design for learning, we are able to utilize different approaches and different methods of instruction and ways to engage our kids. At the end of the day, it is educators' responsibility to work with you and your child for that student to make appropriate progress. And whatever we can do to support that progress and success for a student, if it's a different learning approach, it's a different learning approach. So don't feel shy about talking with your education team about approaches that you feel have been effective for your kiddo. And we've got on our website tons of different communication and academic resources. If you go to dscba.org, there's a brand new resources tab, and you'll see tons of educational resources. Check them out. This is the time to really get acquainted with what your child, how your child learns, and what are the best ways to keep your child motivated and learning and engaged. And if your kid's making progress, then you can advocate for that progress in the fall. So with that, I know we ran a little bit over. Are there any big questions, Nancy, that you'd like for me to address?
Yeah, someone would like to know where they could find the recordings of your sessions, because somebody specifically was looking for Numicon and couldn't find it. So could you give them an update on that?
I can. So we are, so we do have the, I'm not sure if the gal that is updating content on our website, she should be posting that up there. Regarding videos, we've had a little bit of difficulty. We did record the Numicon video, and I'm working with Zoom to be able to actually get the video content on the website for all users to be able to access. In the meantime, for sure, the slideshow with the information from the slideshow, if it's not already on the website, it should be there. It will be there, I'm sure, by the end of the day. So we will have all of the slideshow presentations that have all of this content available to you guys, and we are working on getting those actual video recordings up for you as well.
Okay, I don't see any other questions, Elizabeth.
Okay, well, I appreciate it, guys. I know that sorry, due to those technical difficulties, we ran a bit over, but I do appreciate your all's time. Again, if you have some specific questions, if you're not